Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. Now, several months ago, I did a video that was the first $100 that a new prepper should spend. And the premise behind that video was, say you were somebody like maybe a college student or somebody who has never done things like camping or hunting, and preparedness and all the stuff that could go along with that is something completely new to you. Okay, the purpose of that video was, if you're in a situation like that, getting you the things that you would need to get through something like a 3 to 5 day maybe snow in, or situation where you can't leave your house for maybe another reason, or if you have to leave, that way you'll have some basic things that you can take with you. So in that video we talked about things like having a little bit of water storage, some basic food items, and then the beginnings kind of an EDC. Things like having a small pocket knife. I believe the one I picked out was a Victorinox Recruit. And then a small flashlight that you can use with some batteries. And all of that came to around $100. I think it was like $100 and some change. But nowadays, of course, because inflation is ruining everybody's lives, the stuff in that video would probably cost a little bit more. I haven't done the exact math, but I imagine it'd probably be around $110, $115. But I wanted to do the next $100 that a new prepper should spend. But before we get too deep into the video, I just want to kind of throw a couple of things out there. And the first one is, I don't control prices. So if the prices are a little bit different than what I mentioned in the video, that happened after I filmed. So I don't really have any control over that. I did go through and do my best to make sure that everything that I'm saying is accurate as of this filming, but really that's all I can do. And then also, some of this stuff is going to be things that I talked about in previous videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of the budget option, which would fit everything around $100, but I'm also going to give you some higher end options as well if you want to spend a little bit more money in certain areas. The first thing on this list is going to be a good fixed blade camp knife. And if you're on a budget, one of the best ones that you can get is going to be the Mora Companion. People dearly love these things. They're made of great steel, they have comfortable handles, they're almost indestructible, and they come with a sheath that has a drain hole that's very easy to clean because it's just plastic. Now, the good thing about a Mora Companion is that you're going to be able to do pretty much anything that you might need to with a knife. It's going to be great if you're in the kitchen just slicing up tomatoes, and you're also going to be able to, like, if you need to process game in the field, you're going to be able to do that. Because of its size, you're going to be able to handle anything from a small little squirrel all the way to a deer. That's actually why I got this one, because it's stainless steel and I wanted something that I could take out with me that I wouldn't have to worry about rusting like my other knife, at least as quickly. And at around $20, you really can't go wrong with this. The stainless steel versions are a little bit cheaper. They're around like $17 or $18. The carbon steel versions are right at $22 as of making this. Now, if you want something that's a little bit higher end, then you can go with something like a BK16. Okay, I have taken the coating off of the blade on this one. As of making this, a BK16 with just its standard sheath. This is an aftermarket one, and this is some aftermarket hardware that I added. But just a stock BK16 with its regular sheath, as of making this, is $94, which is significantly more than what we paid for this one when I first got it. But kind of what you're going to get with a BK16, or maybe some other options like an SE4, or some of the knives by Ontario, is you're going to get a full tang blade, which is going to be extremely tough. You're going to be able to handle things like carving, batoning, if that's something that you like to do, without any trouble at all. And of course, it's also going to be great for food prep. One thing to realize though about carbon steel blades like 1095 is they are not going to be nearly as corrosion resistant as this little Mora. So that's why I'm kind of going to move more towards this when I go deer hunting and we gotta, skin and gut them. I'm gonna do more with that Mora, just because it's gonna be easier to maintain out in the field, and it's gonna be a little bit more forgiving than that BK16. But more as a good budget option. And I mean, really, in some ways, it does kind of compete with higher end, more expensive knives in some way. The main drawback to it being that it is not full tang like some of those other knives. The next item on this list is going to be a decent water filter, and an excellent budget option for that is going to be a Sawyer Mini. As of right now, I believe they're $21.97. And the good thing about a Sawyer Mini, in addition to it being inexpensive, is it's very small, very lightweight, has a capacity supposedly of 100,000 gallons if you maintain it and back flush it when you need to avoid it getting clogged up. But it filters down to 0.1 microns, which will remove all sediment, bacteria, protozoa. Really, the only things it won't remove are going to be things like viruses and chemicals. So in the previous video, we talked about having some bottles of water stored along with a 7-gallon Aquatainer. Having something like this is going to allow you to renew your water supply if you have something like maybe a backcountry creek or pond or something like that that you don't really think is contaminated with chemicals and hasn't really been exposed to human contamination, like fecal contamination, where you might have to worry about viruses and things like that. Now, that's pretty darn cheap. $21.97. Sawyer makes some other filters. I think the squeezes are around $30. The Sawyer tap, which you can put onto like a spigot or your faucet during boil water notices, that's going to be around $40. But if you're wanting something a little bit higher end that can also filter out viruses and chemicals, then I think the Grayl GeoPress is an excellent option. This one's more expensive. It cost $100 for the bottle system and then the filter that it comes with. But this is a water purifier, meaning that it's going to remove bacteria, protozoa, in addition to viruses and chemicals. So this is going to be something that is going to be better in an urban environment where you are more likely to encounter water sources that maybe have been contaminated because they're from roadway, like water runoff from like maybe storm drains, because oil and stuff like that does end up on the roadway and it gets washed away along with, say, rainwater and stuff like that. And then also in an urban setting, you do have to worry about human contamination with people not taking care of their mess literally properly, and that contaminating waterways as well. Now, one drawback to this, in addition to its price, is the filtering elements do not last nearly as long as something like the hollow fiber membranes in this Sawyer. And the reason why is water purifiers, they tend to have things like activated charcoal in them, that the way that they do their job is they absorb contaminants. And once they're exposed to those contaminants and exposed to oxygen, then they just start absorbing until they can't absorb anymore. And then either its effectiveness is reduced or it just won't do its job at all. So you probably need to get some extra filters. I think those are around 25 or 30 now. But having some way to filter additional water as you go on is extremely important. And if you want something that you can keep at home on your countertop and purify large amounts of water, then something like a Berkey is probably going to be the direction that you want to go. In my previous video, the foods that I selected were things that you did not need to cook. So you were limited to things like beef jerky, crackers, peanut butter, and stuff like that, because the video assumed that you did not have something like a camp stove. So the next thing on this list is going to be a cheap, inexpensive way to reheat foods or cook. And for a really inexpensive stove, something like this Spirit Burner is a great option. This particular one is made by Solo, and you're going to be able to do things like heat up soup. You can even boil water, and you might even be able to cook smaller things like in something like a skillet. Now, this can run off different types of alcohol. I used denatured alcohol in here. So between that setup, this is around, let me see, $17.99 for this one right now. So it's actually at a pretty decent price. I think it's on sale. I think the normal price is like $24.99. So there's no telling when it'll jump back up. And then for a can of denatured alcohol, you can get that at local hardware stores, places like Walmart, Home Depot, other places, for around like, I think $7 for a can that size. So for the whole thing, I mean, you're looking at, you know, around $30 for the stove and the fuel both. Now for something like this, you're going to want something that you can set over the top of this to put a pot or a skillet on top of. I think technically you can put it directly on top of here, but it's kind of, I mean, that's not very stable. I know Coghlan's, they make a good little folding stove that you can slide something like this down into, set a pot or a skillet on top, and then cook that way. Usually those are around 15, so if you have a little bit extra money, you can spring for that. But if you don't, you can always just get 2 pots or pans that are the same height. Take your grate out from your oven, set that on top, put this underneath it, set your pot on top, and that should work fine. Now, if you have a little bit extra money to spend, then you can get something like either a butane or a propane camp stove. This is the one that I used in my how to dye my Carta knife handles video, and I've had this thing for years. I think I got it, and good grief, either 2007 or 2009. I got it for a camping trip to Big Bend National Park. I forget which one it was because I took a trip in 07 and a trip in 09. But I've had it ever since. And propane camp stoves, they're pretty durable and they last almost forever. The only thing wrong with this one is that the electric start deal, the little buttons here, they don't really spark the way that they're supposed to anymore. But I mean, that's easily fixed with the lighter or a ferro rod or a match. So that's not a big problem for me. And usually propane stoves and also butane stoves, although butane stoves tend to be on the cheaper end of the spectrum, most of the time they're between $40 and $80. But what you get with one of these is you can cook a lot more stuff with one of these than you can a spirit burner. Now, spirit burners, they get hot and they can cook some stuff that maybe you wouldn't think they would. But if you want something that will allow you to cook like you had electricity, then you're going to want either a propane or a butane stove. Now, one thing I have noticed is that with inflation and all that other stuff going on right now, is that the price of 1 pound propane bottles has gone up more than the price of those 8-ounce butane canisters. So I was able to go to Walmart the other day, and an 8-ounce butane canister is still $3.12, which isn't really, I don't even know if it's any higher than what it was before all this happened. But a 1 pound bottle of propane has gone up, I think, by like $1 or more. Like, I think a 1 pound propane bottle now is either $4.97 or maybe $5.97. Sometimes it depends on what store you go to. Even like different parts of town, the prices can be different. But the price of butane for some reason has remained a little bit more stable as of making this. Of course, the price could have jumped up yesterday and I didn't go to Walmart, so I don't know that. But either a propane or a butane stove is going to allow you to cook basically like you normally would, although they do cost more than an alcohol stove would. But the thing about an alcohol stove is you're going to be able to put this in a bug-out bag and travel with it a lot easier than you could something like this. So it's all just kind of give and take. The next items on this list are going to be lighters, and I think it's a good idea to have a couple different types. Have these long ones for if you are grilling at home or you need to light your fireplace or doing like a camp stove or something like that, and then having these smaller ones that you can keep in your pocket, in bags and stuff like that, just having several of them. Now, if you just buy one of these, the big version, get the big version. This one I haven't been all that happy with, but a good Bic lighter in this configuration is probably going to be around $3 or $4 if you just buy one. And of course, you can get multi-packs of these for around $5. But I mean, having lighters, they just have a ton of different survival uses. They're very handy to have around. I don't smoke, but I don't know, I might have more lighters spread around different places maybe than some folks that do, but they are a great first tool to use to get a fire started, just because, I mean, they're so easy, and the Bics are pretty darn reliable. There are people out there that, I mean, I'm not an outdoor survival expert or anything like that, but folks like Dave Canterbury, I mean, they teach, you know, the ferro rods and all the other stuff. But, I mean, his main go-to is one of these guys right here, and there's a very good reason for that. The next item on this list is going to be a good ferro rod, and both of the ones that I have here cost around $15 if you get them in certain configurations like this one. I believe this is a Swedish Light My Fire fire steel. I got it as part of the bottle cook set from Self-Reliance Outfitters, but for the ferro rod and the striker, which also has a little whistle on it, that's right around $15. And then this one here, this one just by itself is $10, and that's what I bought, but you can get this one with some like a paracord. This is just something I added, but you can get it with paracord and a striker for around $15 as well. And the good thing about a ferro rod is you can use it to start up, like, you know, fires out in the field. You can use it to start up maybe your camp stove or an alcohol stove if you don't have a match or a lighter, and you're going to be able to get thousands of strikes out of something this size. I tend to like the larger ferro rods better, just because A, you have more material to work with, and then also you have more to hold on to with a larger ferro rod, which is an important thing to think about if maybe you're wearing gloves or you're in a situation where your hands are cold, your dexterity is going to suffer. So having something bigger to hold on to is always much nicer than having to deal with like a little piddly ferro rod. Now, of course, I do have a small ferro rod that I keep in my wallet just as a backup, but having one of these in like an emergency situation, or if you're in a situation where you ran out of matches or you don't have any matches or your lighter stops working, it could be a lifesaver, and at the very least, it can make your life a whole lot more convenient. And the last item on this list is going to be some additional food. I know you can usually go and you can pick up decent cans of soup like Progresso, Chunky Campbell's soup, or Wolf brand chili for like, hope you have some toilet paper. But anyway, you can get those for around $2 each. So if you get 5 of those, then that'll wipe out the last $10 for this next $100 that you should spend. Now, after this video, if you go and buy all those things, then of course you can branch out into other types of food as well, since you can boil water, you can heat up different types of meals. Then you can branch out into freeze-dried survival foods like Mountain House, or if you like ramen, then you can pick up some cases of that. I would not recommend ramen being a significant part of your survival food plan, just because, especially like the Maruchan instant lunch, I don't even know if I pronounced that right. It's not nutritionally all that great, and it doesn't have as long of a shelf life as some other stuff out there. But you'll also be able to cook things like other types of noodles, which is great. So I strongly recommend continuing to build on your food and your water storage as much as you can. Now, if you have not seen the original video in this series, the first $100 a new prepper should spend, I will put a card and a link down in the description below. And if you're wondering what should be a new prepper's first big purchase, go ahead and click the card. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again.